This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
So today we're doing Chapter 3 of The Eye of the World, The Peddler. The chapter heading picture is the Dragon's Fain for Chapter 3.
Yeah, this is one I've been kind of excited to do.
But we left off last time with Padan. Fain shows up in the village, and Chapter 2, the strangers, ends, and the Peddler begins.
Right, and he's not a stranger to the town. Padan Fain, he's been coming there he may be an outsider, but he's not a stranger. He's been coming there their entire lives.
Yeah, like almost a generation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's known the boys since they were little kids. Not well. You know, he rolls into town, and there's a quote. He enjoyed being the center of attention, strutting around like an undersized rooster with every eye on him. And that's just sort of, he's what you expect a Darkfriend to be.
Yeah, he's a good image. He's like underweight, kind of
Napoleon-esque in his like desire to overcome his height deficiency, even though I know that's a myth. But sort of he has that personality of like a short guy who wants to be the center of attention, and he's got that sort of selfishness to him that seems to be a characterization of almost every Darkfriend that we come across. I really do think that's the primary trait of a Darkfriend.
He's kind of a self-centered jerk.
Yeah.
And to show up in this like backwater town that still has thatched roof huts that they live in, essentially. I think he just really enjoys seeming like a cultured, worldly man when really he's a
small fish in a big pond, or big fish in a small pond.
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
I think of Fain as like this sort of arrogant, you small towners don't know what's going on.
So he shows up, and the villagers clamor to start trading really quickly, and Padan Fain kind of ignores them while he's, I guess, unhitching his horses and tying off his reins and stuff.
I sort of imagine like a WWE scene with like, you know, the wrestler walks out and he's like taking his cape off and everyone's like going nuts, and he's like, wait, I got to take care of this little thing over here. Mm-hmm. I got to put this away. I got to, you know, and everyone's like, tell us, you know, and like he's just like, yeah. When you get a chance. Because the news, you know, I mean, like obviously they want the needles and the pots and the pans, but the news is what really gets them excited about someone coming into town. They have no news channels, no internet. Like their internet is the peddlers and the system of people who come to trade.
This is really the majority of their contact with the outside world, and it happens once a year.
Yeah, and with the winter being so bad, they haven't had many outsiders at all, so they're even more desperate for that attention and that knowledge.
Emmonsfield folk have contact with the other people that I think is called, the region is called the Two Rivers. Oftentimes we refer to it just as the Two Rivers, but
right.
The Two Rivers includes Emmonsfield, Devon Rye, and a few other small towns. Tarrant
Ferry
being the largest one.
Tarrant Ferry is sort of the border to the outside. You come into Emmonsfield, which is sort of in the middle, and then you have one town to the north and one town to the south.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Except, I think... Oh, yeah. Emmonsfield is in the middle. And the Two Rivers is actually like 3 rivers. There's a bunch.
Are you sure you're not looking at like a border or something?
Am I?
Yeah.
I'm not looking at this very closely. Oh, yeah. One of those rivers is the Old Road. Whoops. This is 2 rivers that make like a roughly U shape, right?
Yeah.
And then the wine spring runs in between them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the wine spring wouldn't really count as a river. It's a spring.
Yeah, so it's a small...
Yeah. And it looks like it pretty much goes into tributaries. Well, I guess I think it joins the White River, is what you'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I would assume that the water from the wine spring runs down from the Mountains of Mist.
Yeah. Yeah, and it looks like it just breaks into a bunch of tributaries into the mire.
Yeah, collects in the mire, and then it trickles through the waterwood.
Yeah, so it goes through the waterwood, and then it pools in the mire, and then I'm guessing the mire drains into the rivers again. You have an area that's surrounded on 3 sides by 2 rivers, because the Tarrant Ferry is north, and west of town, and then the White River is south of it.
And the Mountains of Mist on the other side.
Essentially, you're on a peninsula with the one side that's connected to land being mountainous.
And I think we see that certain times of the year the rivers are impassable, or no one comes down.
I think so. I would think it would be springtime with all the snow melt coming off the mountains.
That's what I was going to say. It would make sense if the wine spring were snow melt related.
Well, the wine spring is from underground.
Yeah?
That's why it's a spring.
Oh.
Wine Spring Inn is built, I believe, on the spring itself.
Oh.
Well, whereas the two rivers do come from mountain runoff.
No wonder Master Elvira makes such great beer.
Yeah.
Perfect water.
Absolutely. I mean, water's, the number one ingredient in beer. And if you look at the history of beer, you can really see that the type of beer that was brewed in each area is almost directly related to the quality of the water there. So one of the reasons that the Northwest has such great IPAs is because we have water that has very few minerals in it. Interesting. And that really holds the hop flavor very well. It's just sort of the default beer brew, a nice amber ale.
Yingling.
Yeah, exactly.
Shout out to the East Coast.
Oh yeah, Philly. I grew up on Yingling. That was the first beer I ever drank in quantity.
I did too. I'm spoiled now though. These Oregonian ales are the best, I think.
Oh yeah. We'll go back to Fain. He's done his puttering around and he's ready to sort of give his big speech about what's going on. And sort of as the crowd gets quiet, Rand is still yelling, and so he has this no, not now, and it echoes through the whole crowd.
Him and Perrin were yelling back and forth, and then in that awkward moment when everyone quiets down, but you're focused on something else, and you're still yelling, that happens.
That happens to me all the time. It's not necessarily something that other people notice. It's just something that you see in your own head, and you think everyone notices, but you don't.
Yeah. Well, Fain notices.
That's what I was going to say. Fain notices. No one else turns and looks at him. No one cares. But Fain gives him this searching look. And you could say, yeah, that's because, Fain wants to tell a story and he interrupted and threw off the rhythm. I think it's because Fain knows it's Rand he's looking for.
Right. And in previous episodes we've mentioned this, but we haven't mentioned it yet in this one, so we might as well talk about it again.
Right. So the whole reason that Fain's, we're sort of talking about the events, but the reason that Fain is so interesting is he is the Dark One's hound. He has been brought to Shale Ghul and remade to seek out Rand, and really all three of the boys. They called it distilling down his essence, speaking of making alcohol.
Yeah, someone says his soul was distilled.
I think Moraine, after she interviews him in Feldara, basically gives us the summary of what happened to him. So she goes in, pries out what happened to him over many days, and then sort of relates that story to us.
The Dark One somehow, I think Moraine uses the word distilled, but because Padan Fain is a sworn Darkfriend, the Dark One can touch his soul. And somehow, I guess you have to agree to this, or he showed up in Shale Ghul after being called, and the Dark One manipulated his soul to make him a different sort of creature. He's in a human body, but he doesn't have the same sort of soul anymore.
I'm not really sure.
Not a shadow spawn, but something else.
He was given the ability to seek these boys and to sense where they are. He's been going to the two rivers his entire life for 20 years. And he didn't know who the Dragon Reborn is. But at this point, I think the Dark One has a decent idea of where he is, and he's looking for him. And so he's going out and says, hey, I have this dark friend who's been traveling the area. I'm going to pull him to Shale Ghul and give him a set of instructions and imprint them into his soul so that he has to follow those instructions. And he has to follow those boys.
He has to follow Rand specifically.
More than the other two, but it's pretty evenly split in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
I think he gets more attuned to Rand as he realizes that Rand is the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah. And we should mention also that Padan Fain is the Hound, and he's leading the Hunters.
Right. He has led the Myrddraal and the Trollocs, which we'll see later, to the town. And so the whole reason we've seen that Dark Rider is because that Dark Rider is with Fain, and they've shown up at the same time. Rando says it had only been the year before that Fain had taken notice of them for the first time, acknowledged them as men. And I have to wonder if that wasn't him, if that was pre-distillation or post-distillation.
Well, he says this is the first year he had done that, right? Maybe he's really actually only noticing them because he has to now.
I think so. I think that basically the year before or something, he was looking for boys of a certain age.
This year he knows who they are.
This year, that knowledge has been distilled down, and he is able to track them.
Yeah.
Here's a guess of what happened. That basically, he, as a Darkfriend, he was given instructions to go out and talk to any boys between a certain age along his route. And so last year he went out and found all those boys, including Rand and Perrin and Mat. And then he went back to Shale Ghul, had that knowledge distilled down, and was then given an addiction to track one of those boys.
Yeah. Jeez, I was reading this, but I can't remember exactly where it was, I think in this chapter, but I remember seeing a list, basically, that went from, like, Ewan as the least likely, and then Rand, Mat, Perrin, and there were a couple other boys, like another 3 maybe in the village that were, like, of a close enough age that they were all sort of under suspicion from all these different
They're the ones
groups.
who also see the Fade.
That's right. Rand's conversation with Tam.
Yeah.
Where Rand is like, wait, so you believe me?
That's in the next chapter, I think?
Yes, that's in the next chapter.
Yeah, we get a list of boys who have seen the Fade, and those are all the boys that I assume Fain had talked to.
So I guess the point is there's like 6 or 7 boys in this area that are all of similar age and all sort of under suspicion for possibly being this Dragon Reborn.
Right. But 3 of them are of a very particular age, within a week of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, of course, Mat, Perrin, and Rand. The other boys are like, they're the same age, but they're like 9 months away.
Yeah.
And so that's far enough that they're easily ruled out.
Now I'm just thinking about what a thinly populated place where we're looking at, well, I don't know how many square miles, but a large area. There's like, these are all farmers that own lots of land, or mostly farmers. And there's like 7 boys between the ages of like 17 and 19 or something. There's 7 of them.
Right.
That's it. That's a tiny, well, yep, thatched roofing.
Yeah.
Keep going off about this, but thatched roofing, guys. Seriously. Where have you ever been under like you've been under like a novelty thatched roof, like in Long Beach Island or...
Trying to live under a thatched roof in sub-zero temperatures, like, no thank you.
Right.
No thank you. I'm good.
This is the Iron Age.
Fain gives Rand a sharp look, and then he gives the town some news.
With a loud harumph, Fain tugged at his heavy cloak. No, not later, the peddler declaimed, after overhearing Rand with the last thing he was saying to Perrin. Once more throwing up a hand grandly, I will be telling you now. Said, well now, spring is late everywhere. There are wolves everywhere, all hungry for any flesh they can sink a tooth into, be it sheep or cow or man. But there are things worse than wolves or winter. There are those who would be glad to have only your little troubles. He paused expectantly. Ooh.
What was he expecting? Like a...
What could be worse than wolves killing sheep and men? Senbui demanded. Others muttered in support. Men killing men. The peddler's reply in portentous tones.
Of course, Sen is the one who speaks up there. He falls right into the trap of like...
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. It's one of the dumb ones. And he's talking basically about this new false dragon. And this false dragon is Mazrim Taim?
No, this is Logain.
Oh, this is Logain. Okay.
Yeah.
Oops.
So this is... Logain is basically declared himself Dragon Reborn in Giladon.
Is that the correct pronunciation?
I think it changes a couple of times in the audiobooks. I go with Giladon.
We got 1 or 2 corrections on our pronunciation this past week, But I'm curious, where is the source?
I mean, there's a pronunciation guide in the back. I mostly go off the audiobooks just because I've heard them so much.
Why don't I ever use that? I've never ever look at that part of the book.
Oh, and I have to apologize. I was definitely saying Taim, not Tam, in one episode. I was adding in the I. I did mean Tam, Rand's father, not Taim.
Taim or Tame, Mazrim Tame, or Mazrim Taim.
I add Taim. I say Mazrim Taim, but Tame is
I'm
definitely
shaking my head, guys.
Yeah,
It's too much.
Again, it's a couple of different ways in the audiobooks, and we're reading these books. It can be whatever it is in your head.
That's true. For the longest time, I never had to worry about saying this out loud.
Right, yeah. No, I mean, gosh.
Which is probably part of the problem.
We all have our own pronunciations in our head that may or may not agree with what everyone else thinks about.
I was sure her name was Nineveh forever. For years and years, I just said Nineveh. Naive.
Unfortunately, I've listened to the audiobooks so much, I have a hard time recalling what my original pronunciations of them were, but they were very different in some cases. Well, not Rand, Matt, and Perrin. Those were pretty standard.
Well, those are easily pronounced. Nynaeve's tough, and some of the names later in the book get a little...
I think I was thinking like Nynaeve, but I didn't have two syllables. I think it was like Nyanave or something like that was in my head. Egwene was Egwene, I think. Egwene was what I used to say in my head. I do a lot of reading visually. I don't necessarily sound things out in my head, so I would have a hard time saying that I had pronunciations in my head. What I'd see was the names. Oh, that's the chick whose name begins with NY. And that's kind of what I would think in my head as I was reading, is I just know that name was related to that character, but I never tried to actually pronounce it.
I used to do that. I mean, now you can quickly Google it, and someone has already figured this out and given you all the information. But, back when I was a kid, I would sometimes, I remember, especially when I was younger, if I saw a name, like a name in a fantasy novel that was unpronounceable to me, I would just rename that person and just use that for the rest of because it doesn't matter. You're never going to talk to anyone about it.
And which is fine as long as you're not talking to anyone about it.
But we'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
So far, nobody's arguing. We're probably just wrong.
That's gonna be a theme, I think. Is we're gonna be like, no, we're not arguing with you. We realize we're wrong. We're sorry. We're doing our best. Please forgive us.
So then people start freaking out because they hear about this false dragon.
Yeah, Loghain is kicking some ass. He can channel. That's what's throwing them off. Is Loghain is actually a pretty powerful male channeler. And he knows some stuff at this point. How he knows stuff, I don't know. I think he's entirely self-taught, but I don't have any background information on him as far as I know. I don't know his origins.
We're talking about Fain, right?
Loghain.
Oh, Loghain.
Or I don't want to say Logan because that's Wolverine. Loghain.
God, I want to say he was like a minor nobleman.
Really?
Not terribly important, like his father was a landowner or something like that.
But I don't know how he got any skill with the power.
Luck, I would imagine.
And he does pretty well. He doesn't seem to be tainted.
Loghain never does get go insane.
No.
He's isn't he known? Well, maybe not known, but don't we find out later that he is like one of the longest lasting channelers who isn't affected by the taint?
Yeah. One thing to consider is a good chunk of this he was gentled.
Oh, that's right.
So it's very hard to you can't continue to go insane because he wasn't channeling. And even when he was healed, he was shielded for a long time.
Yeah, he was a minor Geldanan noble.
Yeah.
Sounding it out, guys. Geldanan.
Giladon?
Giladanan. It is like Geldan I-N. So Giladanan. See, I've always said Geldan. I gotta read more about this power rating thing. It says, in the Wheel of Time Companion, his level of strength and one power is described as ++2, making one of the most... What is ++2? Do they base it off like a single character?
So originally, Jordan came up with a power rating scale for his characters to keep them straight. And I believe it was 1 through 72. some number. I think it's 72. I'm not really sure. And that's sort of your standard Aes Sedai power range. But then he started coming up with these super channelers, and he wanted to make them more powerful. And so he created a second power level. I'm getting probably some details wrong here. Essentially, he kept adding levels, and then he had to compare men and women, and they had different levels. And so there's all sorts of meaning between the pluses and the numbers and how they relate. And essentially, by being 2 pluses, he's a super powerful channeler. If you see a plus, he's a powerful channeler.
Gotcha.
The double plus is sort of the men powerful channelers. And one thing I want to talk about with power is a lot of people have more raw power than others, but if they don't have the skill to use it, they are weaker channelers.
Sure.
I think Agenor is a great example of this. He is actually, in raw power, the second most powerful channeler or something. He's up there with Lewis Theron and Ishmael. But because he's a scientist and doesn't use it for battle, he's not very effective in battle.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I did know that about the Age of Legends, though, that to earn your, third name, a lot of people weren't famous for their channeling ability. They were famous for, whatever you get done, like something you do for humanity to improve everyone's lives. That's what you're rewarded for. So you could use your channeling in any number of ways.
You have these super powerful Forsaken, but some of them are scientists, and you take a scientist and put him in the Iron Age, he's not going to do you a lot of good.
That's my theory with Cadsuane. I think that the super channelers, or whatever you call them, I'm air quoting, the super channelers are all probably, my theory, I don't have much to back this up, but my theory is that Cadsuane is not as powerful as the majority of them. She's maybe like really high on the list, but I think she's just much more experienced, much more talented. She has a ton of tricks up her sleeve. She is like a manipulative son of a bitch. Like, she gets what she wants, and a lot of times she's not using the power to do it. So I think that she's just far trickier and more clever than most people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she's at the top of the power scale of Aes Sedai, but that's that 1 through 72.
Right.
And so she is sort of at the top end of that, which gets her up to about 600 years of life. That's the other way I sort of measure power, is how long would they live if they hadn't sworn the oath.
Is it strength in the power?
Yes.
Or use? Is it frequent use, or is strength in the power?
Both.
Gotcha.
Right. So the more you use the power and the stronger you are, the longer you're going to live. Because if you never use the power, it doesn't matter how strong you are. You're probably... now I'm coming back to the kin. And the kin live a very long time if they're powerful, and they don't necessarily use their power a lot.
Yeah.
Because they have to hide. It's entirely possible that you have to use your power, but then once you've used it, your strength determines how long you live.
We should probably move on with the chapter.
Right. I think we took a bit of a diversion there. Since Loghain can channel, we're back to Loghain, they have to, the Aes Sedai are tracking him down because really only they can handle him at this point. They're there to shield him and imprison him. No one else really has the ability to shut down a powerful channeler.
Yeah, except, mostly red and green Aja Aes Sedai are people who are sent to handle this sort of thing. And really mostly red.
Mostly red, yeah.
We see Padan Fain coming into the village and kind of grandstanding and giving all the villagers this news. The people start to freak out a bit when they hear that this could be, or they're maybe a little nervous that this could be the actual dragon reborn, because these myths and legends are well known. And we see people crying, the dragon, someone moaned. The dark one is loose in Gillidan. Not the dark one, Harald Luhan growled. The dragon's not the dark one, and this is a false dragon anyway. And people start arguing over what the dragon is, what does that mean?
I think this is a good scene that feeds us a lot of information, basically saying, hey, here's what the dragon is, here's what the people think the dragon is. They're wrong in a lot of cases, but there's a lot of contradictory information in the scene about about the dragon, and it's sort of these are the legends and the myths. He's sort of this boogeyman of the village.
Yeah, surrounded by a lot of sort of silly superstition, which is sort of unsurprising for a bunch of people who have thatched roof houses.
No real way to communicate with civilization.
And the doctor is a witch.
A very skilled witch.
Right. There's real magic happening. Just saying, this is the world that they live in.
And I love the way the boys talk about Aes Sedai, and they're just so wrong. They're like, oh, all Aes Sedai serve the Dark One, and
right.
Okay, a lot of them do, but
one of the boys, I think Matt, is sure that Lan couldn't possibly be a warder because he's not wearing any gold or jewels, and
right.
he looks very plain. He's just wearing wool clothes or something.
Right. No way he's a warder. He's just got this cloak that makes him blend in with the background. No way is that a warder thing. I
just understand how nobody's like, what the fuck is up with the magical cloak?
Right.
That's clearly magic.
Right. It's just camouflage. Really good camouflage that makes you see through.
Or maybe it's just that convincing. I don't know.
So you were talking about this quote, and I really liked it, but I don't remember what it was in reference to. It was a Tam quote, and he said, "I never saw or heard or smelled anything that couldn't be talked about."
So this is just a few paragraphs later, and we see a lot of debate about people debating about what the dragon is, like if this could possibly be the real dragon. People are sort of panicking about that. And some of the men from the village council step in. The debate goes something like, well, if it wasn't a real dragon, then why are the Aes Sedai coming to get it? It's bad enough to have Fain here talking about false dragons using the power with this dragon-possessed fool of a boy bringing Aes Sedai into it. Some things just shouldn't be talked about, and I don't care if you will be letting that fool Gleeman tell any kind of tale he wants. It isn't right or decent. And then Tam says, "I never saw or heard or smelled anything that couldn't be talked about," Tam said, but Fain was not finished. And they go on, talking about the Aes Sedai and essentially debating what to do about this outdated news.
See, and that's Tam sticking up for anti-censorship. I don't think there's any reason to not talk about something for decency's sake. That always really drives me nuts.
Right, and I think it's just a good example of Tam's sort of level-headedness in these situations where he probably already realizes that, like, if this is an issue, like, in the unlikely possibility that this could come to the Two Rivers, like, we should certainly talk about what we're going to do. It's ridiculous to not even discuss it.
He's also calling out Senbui for arguing with a child.
Yeah, that's not a good sign. I think they're all elected officials, though. Tam makes a comment. I think this is in the next chapter again. But Tam makes a comment to Rand that the members of the village elected the council members, or the members of the village council, because they trust them. And so we make these decisions sometimes to soothe the people, not necessarily because they make any sense, but to let people know that we're doing something. And he says, like, all these they're good men, all except maybe Master Buey, but what does that say about the rest of the town? And he says some offhanded comment about that, like, well, there's always dummies. The Aes Sedai are already into it, the Peddler spoke up. A party of them has ridden south from Tar Valon. Since he can wield the power, none but Aes Sedai can defeat him. For all the battles they fight, or deal with him once he's defeated, if he is defeated. Someone in the crowd moaned aloud, and even Tam and Bran exchanged uneasy frowns. Huddles of villagers clumped together, and some pulled their cloaks tighter around themselves, though the wind had actually lessened. Of course he'll be defeated, someone shouted. I just thought that was a good paragraph to kind of demonstrate the mood of the scene there. And with the news, we see the village council, mostly Bran Alvear and Tam Althor, kind of hustle Padan Fain down off his cart and then into the inn, where they close the door and lock it, because they insist that because this news is news about potential danger, and there are a lot of possibilities here, including just like a upset village that's nervous, and there's a festival tomorrow. Like, this is this is a sensitive time, and they don't want that ruined, especially after this harsh winter. So they sort of hustle Padan Fain away and close him behind a door and have a talk with him.
Tam later says that's pretty much all optics.
Right. Yeah. Tam says exactly that. Rand asks a question that was pretty pointed. I don't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, Tam says something along the lines of, "Oh, there were no more questions to ask." I think Tam may have left out that they told Fain to stop that. Don't work our villagers up into a lather. There's a war in Gildan, and that's a really long ways away.
With a mountain range between us.
There's no reason anyone is going to come to the Two Rivers, and if they do, it's going to be refugees. Tam mentions that also. Mm-hmm. Like, if people have to run that far, it's not going to be soldiers.
Or just an occasional thief looking for an opportune score.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Steal a few sheep. No
right.
big deal. We'll put a couple eyes on it, but we'll put a few groups of young men on horses to ride, young men and boys on horses with slings to ride around and make sure there's no weirdos slinking around, but probably they'll see nothing.
Well, and what's there to steal in the Two Rivers? It's
sheep.
Not like, sheep.
That's it.
Tobacco.
It wouldn't be worth transporting, really.
Two Rivers tobacco is just a special name for marijuana.
I've seen that theory getting thrown around online. I mean, it's...
I know it's definitely not what's intended in the series, but I think of like... That's why everyone is always really like wants Two Rivers tobacco, is because it's like it's just pot.
The Green Man. I regret saying that. Rand and Egwene get into a silly argument at the end of the chapter, and that's pretty much all that happens.
Rand's perspective on Egwene is terrible. He's a teenage boy, and he has no idea what's going on in her head.
I remember what that was like.
Yeah. And he sees
still like that, really.
Everything she does through the lens of his own sort of self-interest. And so one of the ways I really enjoy reading these books is to completely ignore what Rand thinks about Egwene and watch what she says and what she does. Because what he thinks about her is just wrong. He's just an idiot teenager.
She's an quick learning, very intelligent, driven, and none of those words are really doing her any justice. Highly ambitious person.
Adventurous.
I mean adventurous, yes, but ambitious.
Yeah,
Egwene
absolutely
always wants to be the best.
And she'll do what it takes to be the best.
Anything. Including murder you. That comes later.
Yeah, no problem with that. No. But she is, she's bored in the Two Rivers. Like, she knows at this point.
Wisdom is one of the highest positions available.
Right.
And she's already well on her way at 16 years old.
Totally. But she knows she can't be wisdom in that village.
Right.
So...
Was it Watch Hill that had a very old wisdom?
Or
something
Devon
like
Ride
that?
or something.
I forget.
She
mentions it in this conversation.
Yeah. But she's already thinking about leaving the Two Rivers because she knows to be what she wants to be, she cannot stay.
Yeah.
She is already being like, get me out of this 2-bit little fucking town.
She does not want to move out to the Waterwood and live with Rand.
No, she has no desire to be a farm wife. She shares her dreams with Rand. She tells him, like, I want to leave. And he goes, what?
He'll never leave.
Yeah, he'll never leave. What are you doing? Like, he makes fun of her. Like, no wonder she's pissed off. She tells him she wants to go out and live a life and have adventure and not necessarily settle down with him. And he's like, shut up, woman. Settle down. You're going to marry me and be wisdom of the... like,
it's not quite like that.
No,
he just has this preconceived notion about her.
Totally.
And he just doesn't even understand what she's talking about. Like, he's kind of taken off guard, I think, by the idea that she would even think of leaving.
Right. It's just not even in
town.
His wheelhouse. Like, no, what? No, we're going to get married and we're going to live on a farm. Like, that's not... Of course we're going to do that. Like, it's not even in the realm of possibility that that's not going to happen. And so, he really kind of insults her dreams at this point. Not because he means to, but just because he has no clue that she could have dreams that are apart from his.
No one ever leaves the Two Rivers, he went on. Maybe somebody from Tarrant Ferry, but they're all strange anyway. Hardly like Two Rivers folk at all. Egwene gave an exasperated sigh. Well, maybe I'm strange too. She's like, we're getting real surly with him.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that. I reread that scene from her perspective and was like, Rand's kind of being a jerk.
Yeah, but just, I mean, sort of ignorant.
Yeah. Not deliberately, but yeah,
Very
he's kind of being a jerk.
Yeah.
There's another quote about the Aes Sedai, which I think sort of shows the perspective of the town, where Rand says, "Not if it means Aes Sedai here either," Rand added. "Or have you forgotten who caused the breaking? The dragon may have started it, but it was the Aes Sedai who actually broke the world." And I think that's, this misinformation that's passed down through the generations. It was male Aes Sedai and not modern Aes Sedai, but he pretty much says...
But people don't know that men were ever Aes Sedai.
So a lot of his mistrust, you think about these people who come into your town, and he does not think Aes Sedai are good people. He thinks they're followers of the Dark One. He thinks they're to blame for breaking the world. Yeah. They're almost the worst thing he can think of. And
just like all stereotypes and misconceptions, like this comes from ignorance. This comes from, you can hear all the stories about Aes Sedai you like, but until you actually meet one,
right?
Like, what sort of judgments can you really make?
And there is a grain of truth in them too. Aes Sedai did break the world.
Right.
They were called Aes Sedai. They were men. They broke the world. He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. He's just a dumbass.
Yeah, he just doesn't. He's technically right. He just doesn't understand what Aes Sedai were and the difference between Aes Sedai back then and what they are now. I think it's Rand saying, "I suppose he claimed we'd all live in a new age of legends afterwards too," and it's like,
you might.
Yeah, you're going to. It's like, as it turns out, we pretty much get the modern age after the Return of the Dragon. So that's just one of those wonderful pieces of foreshadowing. That's like, yeah, in the first 3 chapters, he's talking about, oh yeah, afterwards there's going to be another Age of Legends, and I'm going to get there through gunpowder and trains and electricity and all that kind of stuff, which we get some vision into in Avienda's Seeing of the Future.
Mm-hmm.
Just great foreshadowing that's spattered throughout these first couple of chapters, where it's like, this'll never happen. Flash forward to this thing happening.
And I don't know if we're done talking about chapter 3 yet. I mean, we're pretty much at the end of it.
I still have notes.
Oh, okay. Well, there was one more quote that I had, but it's it's just the last 2 sentences, and I just liked the way it rolls right into the next chapter.
They talk about naming the Dark One in this chapter.
Yeah.
And it has real consequences. You name the Dark One, your crops fail. We see several times reality shifts, and when the Eye of the Dark One is on you, like it's an actual problem. And so when we talked earlier about, like, how do we know that the pattern, everyone sort of follows this religion of the pattern and the power, and how do we know that that's true, and why is that? And I say, well, it's because they have evidence, and part of that evidence is, well, you say Shaitan, bad stuff's going to happen to you.
Yeah, and it actually does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really understand how that works in the magic system.
I mean, so my assumption is that the Dark One knows his name, right? And like, he's watching the pattern, and by saying your name, you draw a piece of his attention. And so essentially the Dark One is, you talk about the bubbles of evil and all that kind of stuff, like, on some small level, his attention causes you bad luck, right? If Rand is...
I'm nodding.
Yeah, if Rand at the end is sort of the embodiment of good luck to counteract the power of the Dark One, who is bad luck.
I feel like Rand's more like good fortune.
Sure. He's counterbalancing the Dark One. He talks about the more powerful the Dark One becomes, the more powerful I become, because the pattern needs a balance.
Ooh, possibly deep segue. What is Matt's luck power doing? Is that a manipulation of the pattern? It is.
Yeah, it's related to Shadar Logoth and the dagger somehow.
The luck?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he only gets it afterward.
Uh-huh.
But what What powers would he have? Would he have had as a standalone, like without the dagger?
What do you mean powers?
You know, for instance, Perrin is a dream walker, and what do you call it? Wolf brother.
Sure. Well, he's Taviran, certainly.
Yeah.
He also gets a lot of stuff by going through the Terangrial doorway. So he gets his memories, his Ashendarai, and his fighting skills. Like a lot of his abilities come from going through the doorway. The immunity to the one power comes from the Terangrial he's given.
Yeah.
But that's one half. The other half is his just incredible luck, and the dice in his head.
He really doesn't have a lot of standalone powers.
No.
I mean, he's talented in a duel. We see that.
Tom says he's got the quickest hands he's ever seen.
Yeah. And that's Tom saying that.
Yeah.
Who has the quickest hands you've ever seen.
Right. Yeah, Tom saying that, he knows what he's talking about. So I'd say, that makes him good with the spear. It makes him good at juggling. It makes him, it's his talent, but...
He beats Galad and Egwene at the same time in a duel. I mean, this is all before they're really fully blossomed as characters, but...
How did you say their names?
Galad and Gawain.
Okay.
But yeah, he beats them both in a duel at the same time. He fights both of them. And, I mean, later they're impressive swordsmen. And by impressive, I mean probably some of the best in the world. But I'll read that quote I said I was going to read. And
Read the quote.
The quote is, Egwene drew a deep breath and opened her mouth. Whatever she had been going to say vanished as the door of the inn opened, and a man with shaggy white hair came hurrying out as if pursued. Chapter 4.
Swords, I know we romanticize them in fantasy literature. They're not the greatest weapons. Spears are way better as a weapon. Swords are very, you don't get the sort of dancing sword fight, crane flies over the, waterfalls. Like, that's not what happens in the real world. In the real world, you're basically bashing at someone with a sword as hard as you can to try and break through. I mean, depending on the sword type, but...
I was in a couple of clubs that studied Western style martial arts, and I don't know if that's what's happening in the Wheel of Time, but I've seen lots of real sword fights with blunted blades, and they are not beautiful or graceful looking. It's like, have you ever seen two guys start swinging at each other? It's a shitload like that. Like, even if they're talented, you'll see a couple of quick ducks or something, and then somebody gets hit,
right?
Or somebody closes the distance and punches the other guy. It's not graceful or beautiful.
No, it's not. It's
who can stab the other guy first.
It's a brawl. I mean, that's it's a brawl with sharp implements.
And there's skill to it, but usually fights only last a few seconds. The Green Man.